We are going to go straight to our first interview of the day. Let's welcome Dr. Kwadwo Oppong-Wadie, writer, author, Pan-Africanist, and let's also welcome Major Retired Derrick Oduro, former Deputy Defense Minister for the Republic of Ghana. Gentlemen, you are welcome. Thank you very much for making the time for us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So we're talking security in the sub-region. A lot has happened in the past couple, let's say, weeks. A forced landing in Burkina Faso, a botched coup in Benin, aided by a neighboring country. We're going to look at all of that. But before that, let's watch this very short video so we can put some context on it.
Military plane in western Burkina Faso has reignited tensions between Abuja and the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. In a statement read by Burkina's Minister of Territorial Administration on public television, the AES said the plane was carrying 9 military personnel and did not have authorization to enter Burkinabe airspace. The alliance condemned what it called an unfriendly act that violated international law as well as civil and military aviation regulations. It warned that it has bolstered the security of its airspace and is ready to neutralize any unauthorized aircraft. The incident comes after Abuja sent military aircraft to Benin to defend the government from an attempted coup over the weekend. Nigeria says it was acting at the request of Benin's government and within the framework of ECOWAS mechanisms. There is a growing political divide between West African nations. The AES left ECOWAS in January, and trade between the two regional blocs has been suspended. The region has recently seen a string of military coups, most recently in Guinea-Bissau.
Okay. Major, please, let me start with you. You have been Deputy Defense Minister. That means you have an in-depth knowledge of what's going on in the sub-region so far. As we sit right now, how safe is the sub-region, Major Derrick Oduro?
Thank you, my big brother. And let me say good afternoon to all those of us who have been on panel to talk on this issue this afternoon. Let me say good evening or good afternoon to all those who are watching us, who are listening to us this evening. Yeah, so far, so good. So far as the whole sub-region is not in turmoil, there's no breakdown or a state of disarray or confusion in all the sub-region. We say it's okay comparatively. But it's not well with all other countries. Burkina Faso has staged a coup. Niger has staged a coup. Mali has also staged a coup. Earlier on, some years back, Guinea also had its military takeover. Now, Guinea-Bissau, there was a military coup there, and then the last one was the Benin. Unfortunately for the coup makers, they didn't survive. The government are calling our big brother Nigerians who went in to foil the coup, drop in some bombs, and then the coup couldn't succeed. And then a lot of arrests have been made in Benin. Before that, a lot of security experts had predicted that the sub-region should expect more coups. Why should they say that? Most of them were of the view that bad governance, corruption, insecurity, what the coup makers cite as reasons for toppling the governments are all prevailing in almost all the West African countries. And therefore, since ECOWAS cannot do anything about it to stop bad governance, corruption, and what I have already mentioned, then we should expect other countries to also follow suit. And therefore, they predicted that more coups will happen in West Africa. Lo and behold, the last one was Benin. Benin, which Nigerians made sure it didn't succeed. So, by estimation, by comparing the situation, we say that it's not very, very well with West African sub-region because of bad governance, which all of us are experiencing in the sub-region. And therefore, the earlier ECOWAS did something about it, the better it will stop all coups in West Africa.
Great. We'll get into the details of these things that you've mentioned, the Benin coup and all of that. But let's hear from Dr. Oppong-Wadie in the meantime. Dr. Oppong-Wadie, so in the sub-region, we see the AES, we see, Guinea and all these other examples that Major Retired has given. And now we are also seeing Benin, which wasn't a successful coup, but at the same time, this an attempt regardless. What's your own assessment of security in the sub-region, taking all these coups and other factors into consideration, Doc?
Thank you, Empire. I just want to first say that I want to extend my greetings to Major Oduro, and I also want to extend my greetings to all your viewers. I want to look at this a little bit from a more broader point of view. So there's something which has been happening in the world, and that is there is some consolidation of imperial powers, and by that I mean, if you look within the Americas, for instance, we have seen in the last past weeks or so, the United States consolidating the Monroe Doctrine by emphasizing that the territory of the Americas, particularly South Central and the Caribbean, are all America's territory, and therefore we see a buildup in the Caribbean of U.S. ships pointed out Venezuela, and also there has been some tensions with Colombia and Peru and other countries. Now, why am I saying this? We look at West Africa. In the past few years, we've seen that former French territories, such as Mali, such as Niger, such as Burkina Faso, have all sought to release the stranglehold of France on it. And as we have witnessed, Niger, which used to be classified as one of the 3 poorest countries in the world, when it released the stranglehold of France on it and decided to renegotiate, not even renegotiate, just take control of its uranium. It's now set to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Now, why am I putting all this into context? I'm going to quote Dr. John Henry Clark, who says, in some stories, there are no good guys. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm now coming to Benin. France, and by extension, the colonial powers, even though we in Africa often think of ourselves as having gained independence, from their perspective, they never left. They just refined the whole process of independence. So, in other words, they see themselves as the ones who own and should control our natural resources. So the kind of independence that we got is a kind of nominal independence, so to speak. So France now, as we have seen, has gone through some economic crisis recently. And part of that crisis is also seen as a result of the release of that stranglehold from these countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and other countries which are taking a different stance. Now, why am I saying all this? This failed coup that happened in Benin, that Nigeria went in at the behest of France, right? France is the one who called Tinubu and said, there's a coup, I need you to do something about it. And Tinubu went in with the planes and hit the people who were staging the coup. Now, why does this raises a whole lot of questions, right? Tinubu, in what capacity did you strike Benin? Right? Did you strike as an ally of France, or as a member of ECOWAS, or as independently as the country of Nigeria, or in all three scenarios? Say it again.
Or as ECOWAS, because they could strike
Right.
as a member or as ECOWAS itself.
Or as ECOWAS itself, right. So in which capacity? Also, why is he doing the bidding of France? This again goes back to the idea that France feels like it needs more African territory to support its economy, right? So Nigeria comes in as a so-called partner now, which it can call on to strike Benin. Now, the whole idea that they've been putting forward is that they were restoring democracy, but that also can be questioned, because as we have seen in the past few years, the president of Benin, Talon, has sought to consolidate his power. He has extended, for instance, the what do you call this? The number of years someone can be president, right? He has extended it from 5 years to 7 years, right? He has quietly changed parts of the constitution to consolidate his power. He has extended a parliamentary mandate also to 7 years. And it was quite obvious that he was preparing the ground for his successor, the current finance minister, to take over next year, 2026, when elections are held. So I'm referring back to the quote that in some stories there are no good guys. We have seen that places like Ivory Coast and Benin, strong allies of France, yet acting in ways that are contrary to principles of democratic governance. Yet France says nothing, right, and seeks to retain these people in power. And the question that has to be asked is,
democracy.
Why is France interested in maintaining these, I would say, these people who act unconstitutionally in these countries? And there's only one is because these countries are supporting the economies of France. So I'll pause here for right now, and we can
there's a whole lot to unpack there, and I hope that we can break some of it down as we go along, bit by bit. But let's go back to something that you said about the strike on Benin by Nigeria. Major, as a former defense minister, how do you read that? Does a country have the right to strike another country, a target in another country? Isn't there a clear violation of airspace, number one? Isn't there a clear violation of sovereignty, number two? Because if even if the order had come from the president who was, beleaguered, then we would say, okay, it came from him. But here, we don't even know where the order came from. As Dr. Oppong-Wadie has suggested, it probably came from France. Because we have a country striking another country to prevent a coup. Is that legal? Is that okay? Is that acceptable, Major?
Yeah, thank you. We have a school of thoughts. One school says that every country has its own territorial integrity. It's a sovereign nation. And therefore, whatever happens in each other countries supposed to be their own business. They also have it that, and ECOWAS has also confirmed or has it as part of its protocol that non-interference in each other's country. And for peacekeeping, peace enforcement, or anything that has to do with any assistance to any country must be permitted by warring factions in that country. Not a faction, but warring factions in the country.
Both sides.
And therefore, if we see any country going to the aid of another country, all the warring factions or parties must all agree. Just like what we had in Liberia.
ECOMOG.
How we went to Sierra Leone. And therefore, if you go at the invitation of one party, you go and meet resistance. And therefore, it's suicidal. Now, what happened in Benin? It's the situation where military has taken over. They've announced their presence. They have overthrown the previous administration. They've given the reason why. They were to, so far as I know, they were to give so many reasons, but the first reason that came was a state of insecurity. The northern border, northern part of the country had been encroached, had been taken over by terrorists. Just how Burkina Faso had its share. And therefore, the government was not able to do anything about it. And then the military had been used as punching bags, being killed all the time, and the government refused to do anything about it. Again, they also said, even though the president was about to go in April, but he has appointed somebody to take over from him, and therefore it was unconstitutional, and therefore they had to come in. They didn't last, but once they have announced their presence and then they announced that they've taken over the reins of the government, if ECOWAS could go in at all, we should have a process of going in, but not one country, one superpower in West Africa, moving jet fighters to go and bomb the nation, the soldiers. Now, for how we got it, now they didn't see who were the coup makers. So they started bombing barracks and wherever soldiers had converged. When the soldiers staged the coup, there was no bloodshed. Nobody was killed, even though there were gunshots. But when the Nigerians went in, there were a lot of casualties. And then the coup makers couldn't stand it. And then they abandoned the scene and went away. So they went in before they called other countries to join them. This is what we see as against the ECOWAS protocol of non-interference in each other's country. This is how we see it. Otherwise, we can go on, and one day there will be problems. Look at what happened in Burkina Faso. When ECOWAS countries converged and said that they were going to attack Burkina Faso to dislodge them and give power to the previous administration. Now, little did they know that there were other world superpowers who were backing Burkina Faso. All these chief of staffs and then the military heads converged in Ghana, trying to put things together to attack Burkina Faso. Before we could say, according to intelligence report, Burkina Faso had targeted all the military institutions, military installations in Ghana, down to even the coast. So if we had gone, if we had expedited our action, Ghana would have been in flames, because who knows who were supporting the Burkina Faso. So before you move in to dislodge somebody from his own home, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, one day you fall foul to the law. ECOWAS protocol doesn't allow interference in other people's country until you are fully invited, until the whole ECOWAS country meet to take decision as to the way forward. as to what happened, a school of thought think that it wasn't well with that intervention by Nigeria.
We will unpack more of that also. But let me ask you back, Dr. Oppong-Wadie. Are you particularly surprised by the silence of the sub-region? Let's say that. After another country moves in, bombs another country, that should spark an uproar. I would expect that the leaders within the whole sub-region would be raising concern about this. Because imagine, today is Benin, right? But imagine another time Nigeria or any other country has any reason at all to move into another country and bomb people and move back. They have set a precedent, which I see the whole entire sub-region looking the other way from. Does that shock you?
No, because most of the leaders in the sub-region protect themselves by forming alliances with the former colonial powers. Now, you may also recognize that less than a month ago, there was a so-called coup d'etat in Guinea-Bissau. Notice that the response of ECOWAS to the situation in Guinea-Bissau is very different from how they responded to the situation in Benin. In Guinea-Bissau, it was almost like we didn't hear any Nigeria going into Guinea-Bissau and striking Guinea-Bissau and restoring the government that had been overthrown. In fact, there was mostly silence. I mean, there was talk in the media and stuff like that, but ECOWAS did not act in the manner it did in Benin. And to quote Massa Kwesi Pratt, he says that these people, the heads of state in West Africa, are a club who seek to protect themselves. So hence the silence that we are witnessing. But there's also another dimension that Nigeria needs to be questioned and held accountable for, is the fact that, according to them, they go into Benin to restore "quote unquote" democracy, which we know is fallacious. But in that process, according to Nigeria, their plane, military plane, carrying 9 military men with some generals on board, on its way to Portugal, strays into Burkina Faso. Now, there could have been some understanding if your plane says straight into the eastern part of Burkina Faso, which is closer to Benin. Are your plane straight all the way to Bobo Dioulasso? Bobo Dioulasso is in the western part of Burkina Faso. And apart from that, the Portuguese have denied having any information that Nigeria military was on its way to Portugal, right? Thirdly, how come Nigeria entered into the airspace of Burkina Faso without informing Burkina Faso that, our plane is having some troubles, we're on our way to Portugal and it's an emergency, we need to land in your territory? Nothing like that. So all these scenarios raise a lot of suspicion about Nigeria's role in this whole thing. Are they acting on France's behest and on France's behalf to topple so-called regimes across the West African region who have come in through coups? So to answer your question, the silence of the leaders of the West African states is in protection of their own selves. It's not based on principle. It's not based on anything else. And to your point, that is setting a very bad precedent, considering the fact that Benin seems to have received a very different response from the response that ECOWAS and its member states have given to the same situation that occurred in Guinea-Bissau a few weeks ago.
Okay, we'll come back to that because everything is connected. The forced plane landing, the botched coup, and all of that to me are connected. But yes, but Major, let's come back to you. How important is Benin as a security zone? Let's put it that way. How important is Benin? Why would France? Of course, Doc has already shown us the economic importance of Benin to France, but as a security outpost, if we can call it that, how important is Benin to France, to the point where they would order Nigeria to proxy strike them? How important is Benin?
Yeah, if all what we are hearing, or the intelligence we are gathering is anything to go by, if Nigerians were ordered by France to intervene in Benin, then it will mean that France has lost Burkina Faso. France has lost Mali, as well as Niger.
Yeah.
And therefore, if they sit down for another colony to also get out of their hands, then there will be nowhere. But they could use an ECOWAS country. That is for proximity sake. They share common border with Benin, and therefore Nigeria could just fly less than 2 minutes to bomb, and then they had the power also to do it. And therefore, if they were instigated or ordered by France to go, it's a bad example to set. Now, if we are not very careful, what Kwame Nkrumah termed as neo-colonialism is prevailing now, but now with a different approach. It is not the people in the country who are taking over from their colonial masters, and then they are practicing the same behavior the colonialists were doing, but rather another country, another superpower, imposing its superiority on another country, which is weaker according to the way they pose themselves. So if France is now a colonial master to Benin, is using another country, it's the same way Kwame Nkrumah described as neo-colonialism. They won't come direct, but they will use your own people to work against you. Who said that the reason that Benin gave as insecurity, terrorists approaching from the north, the terrorists, where are they coming from? Are they not coming from Nigeria, Boko Haram? They receive their training over there. That's their training ground. And then they push them to the Sahel regions. Why can't Nigeria stop them? They are still there. And they are bleeding. They are increasing the enemy camp. And therefore, if you cannot deal with the situation in your own country, why should you go and attack other country when they use that one as the main reason why they are toppling their government as insecurity?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why can't they bomb Boko Haram? They say where they can cross into somebody else's territory to bomb them.
Yes.
It couldn't be more dangerous to bomb Boko Haram than to bomb another country, because the other country has a military and an air force too, which can, counter your move. Whereas Boko Haram has limited powers when it comes to airstrikes, as far as I'm concerned, unless, of course, there's something going on in the back we don't know. But let me ask you, again, before we bring Doc back in, Major, please, briefly, in terms of security, you've already mentioned Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. That is a solid block, which is actually also connected together. Benin somehow could also be connected to this block. So if the coup had prevailed, that would have extended the territory of the AES, which the ECOWAS is opposed to. Tinubu, as head of the ECOWAS, or at least as one of the key members of the ECOWAS, would argue that they're trying to prevent that on behalf of ECOWAS. How do you react to that? Major, please, before.
Come again.
So I'm saying that Benin would have, okay, so let's look at it this way. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, that's a solid block. within what used to be the ECOWAS, right? That's breaking away now. Now, if the coup in Benin had succeeded, that would not only have there's a potential that they would have joined the AES, right? By which means they would have increased their landmass and also gained a seaport, by the way. So how do you see the argument that Tinubu may make that he was acting on behalf of the ECOWAS to sustain the sovereignty of ECOWAS as a bloc and preventing the AES from taking more territory, which is something we all know they are opposed to? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, all of us are aware that the terrorists don't have access to the Gulf of Guinea. They don't have access to the sea. And therefore, they are struggling to they push through Ivory Coast. They couldn't get their way. They pushed through Togo. They couldn't force their way through. Ghana is no-go area for them. And therefore, they would wish that they have avenue to get to the sea so that they can transport their heavy equipment, machinery, war machinery to the Sahel regions. And they have not had their way very, very easy. So if they had succeeded and were able to convince the Benin regime, then they could have had easy access to the sea. But what is the guarantee that if the coup had succeeded, they were going to join terrorists? Maybe they were going to join Sahel regions who have broken away from ECOWAS. First, it was ECOWAS that suspended them. It was ECOWAS that sanctioned them. And they said, okay, take your ECOWAS. We'll form our own sub-regional bloc. That is the Sahel regions. And therefore, they did it. Now, ECOWAS, it looks like ECOWAS wants to beg them to come back, which they say over their dead body. But they are sovereign nations. They are not part of the terrorist group. In fact, they were fighting terrorists. Their country, their former government could not sustain the fight, the incursion, the terrorists were pursuing. That is why they overthrew their government. And therefore, they haven't given in to terrorists. And therefore, Benin wouldn't have also gone to join the terrorist group, but rather the military regime countries. That was where they were going to join. So having access to the sea wouldn't mean that the terrorists will have access to the sea. No, but Sahel regions will also have access to the sea through Benin. That is all right. If somebody mentions that, that is okay. But already, they are in good terms with Ghana. Burkina Faso is in good terms with Ghana. Ghana has even come out with a special envoy to handle the Sahel regions. And therefore, they have access to sea. All their importations and then their exports pass through Ghana. They don't have any problem in accessing the Gulf of Guinea or the sea. And therefore, the reason for these people to attempt or to topple their government might not mean that they were being influenced by the Sahel regions, but they are also pursuing their own agenda, their own country's agenda. And if they have succeeded, obviously, we would know that they would have maybe joined because of the uniformity. They are all military regimes. So they could have locked arms together, they could have joined hands together to form another alliance or bloc. Thereby, it will also mean that then ECOWAS is flopping, ECOWAS is collapsing. That is why ECOWAS countries are not happy with what is happening currently, my brother.
Thank you very much, Major. Doc, let me bring that question back to you and let's flesh it out a little more. So we are looking at it. I started by asking how safe is the region, right? It doesn't look to me like, it looks like we are kind of massaging the issues over there because we see the influence of China in the region. China is not coming in through aggressive means. China is coming in through infrastructure. China is building huge infrastructure in Benin at the moment. They really have an interest in there. even though they are not showing too much of their cards at the moment. We also have world powers like Russia, right? With their team in there, Burkina Faso, all that region. We also have France, obviously, who have been there forever and are now struggling to stay. And then we have almighty United States of America, who are also very interested. That's a collision of powers. But we have to make it look like it's okay. How do you feel? What's going on there?
Thank you, Empire. So there's a lot in here. So for instance, let's begin by looking at. Let's start with China. So as you pointed out, China has been a quiet operator on the West African scene, focusing on infrastructure and gaining power through its relationships with the governments in West Africa. The United States obviously sees that as a threat, and as a result, it also is seeking some kind of foothold in the West African region and has established bases all across West Africa, as you know. Now, there is the case of the alliance of Sahelian states aligning themselves with Russia, right, away from the Western powers. And Ukraine also coming out to say that they are supporting the terrorists in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger as a way of fighting a proxy war against Russia. So just this past week, the United States released a document, strategic document, 2025. I think the document is called strategic document, strategic plan, or whatever. And in the strategic plan, they emphasize two things about Africa. That is, they want their relationship with Africa to be transactional, which means that not based on aid as it has been in the past, but everything has to be based on transactions, exchange, whatever. And the second thing is they want access to Africa's natural resources. So all I'm saying here is that we can see proxy wars between the United States and China on one end occurring in West Africa. We can see proxy wars between Ukraine and Russia playing out in West Africa. We can see a new player who is also operating kind of silently, that is Turkey, also coming in, right? So there is a situation where different interests are competing in West Africa, and that brings us back to the question of ECOWAS. Where does ECOWAS stand? We can look at ECOWAS's stance by casting our minds back to history a little bit. When Niger first staged the coup, ECOWAS threatened Niger with bombing it back to the Stone Age if they did not restore the previous government back to power. Now, it was very obvious then that ECOWAS was acting on behalf of the United States and France. So based on that historical precedent, the question also needs to be asked. What is the role of ECOWAS today, and who are they working on the behest of, considering the current context of coup d'etats, particularly in Benin, and putting all that in context. So the situation is complex, to put it in mild terms, but it also behoves that as African people, we need to see these things and we need to address these things. Most of us are not even aware of these happenings. We are not thinking about how these countries see our locations, our resources, as something that they should have. And this is why I began by saying that ever since the colonial period, in fact, since the Berlin Conference, right, these powers have seen Africa's resources as theirs. And even though independence was granted, they have still maintained a stranglehold on our resources as we speak, whether it is oil, whether it is gold, whether it is lithium. Ghana just abrogated a lithium deal because of all the controversy surrounding it. But the thing is, when we look across the board, all the resources that we have, how much do we make? 9%, 10%. If we're good, 12%, right?
We jubilate at 13%.
Right. But in fact, even this lithium thing that was going on, and people were arguing for 10%. There were some people in Ghana saying that Ghana should get 5% because that's what is, it says that our natural resources should only accrue 5% to our country. So they were actually saying that the 10% is okay. Because even according to what we usually get is 5%. So why don't we take 10%? But the question is, can Ghana, for instance, go to Britain and say, you know what, I'm going to come buy your resources, but you only get 10% or 9%. So if we don't begin to look at these situations from a position of equity, then we're always going to be at the end, the wrong end of the stick, so to speak. And all these international conflicts going on, and the role in which we are being made to play should also be brought into context, because what happened with Nigeria striking Benin is not just Nigeria which decided to go and strike Benin. And as both of you have pointed out eloquently, how come? I can think back. I think Boko Haram has been there for at least 15 years.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
How come Nigeria has not been able to send 3 fighter jets to northern Nigeria and obliterate Boko Haram? Because either the government itself is invested in Boko Haram, or there is a foreign power financing and supporting Boko Haram that the government does not want to offend. There's got to be some kind of question and answer situation regarding that. So, in conclusion, I want to say that we should look at the West African situation not just as a situation that is evolving in West Africa alone, but we should also look at it from the point of view of the role that the powers of the world are playing in it, and how we should react based on that.
And this issue that you just brought up, back in the day, I used to wonder, because you would see images of Boko Haram parading a fleet of Toyota Hilux trucks. And I'm like, cars have chassis numbers.
Yeah.
It should be easy to trace vehicles.
Easy.
Right?
Easy.
But you see these so-called terrorists with state-of-the-art vehicles, like, as we say in Ghana, tear rubber, the Hilux trucks.
They have boats, Empire. They have boats that they put on rivers and water bodies. They have like boats. How are they getting all these things? The government should be able to track the financial sources, the sources of finance of Boko Haram, and deal with it. But obviously that's not happening. Just recently we saw that the defense minister of Nigeria had to quote unquote resign. And the question has to be why? Why is he resigning at this crucial time? So there are more questions than answers, but these are some
more questions than there are answers.
About.
Thank you very much. As we wrap up, let's bring the discussion back home. Major, so we as Ghana, right? We have somehow, some people are praising our government, and by government, I'm not just talking about this current government, but how we have handled the issue so far. When the AES broke away and all of that, they were not too friendly with Ghana. But right now, as you stated not too long ago, they seem to be on a friendly note with Ghana. Does that assure some level of security for us at all in Ghana, Major?
Yeah, my brother. If you don't have any problem with your neighboring country, if you don't have any quarrel with your next door neighbor, you can sleep and snore. If Ghana thinks that whatever the previous administration did by assembling all the military heads in Ghana to plan and go and attack Burkina Faso was not in good taste. And therefore, Ghana borders with Burkina Faso. Terrorists are just at the fringes of Ghana. And if they don't do anything, the new government doesn't do anything to stop the influx, the pushing in, the drifting down of the terrorists, then Ghana will not survive. And therefore, they thought it wise to be in good terms with Burkina Faso. So special envoy was appointed to deal with that. And then Ghana is in good terms, very, very good terms with Burkina Faso. And they know that we are not next door neighbors. We don't want terrorists to enter our country. Burkina Faso government doesn't also want terrorists in itself. They are still driving them away. So we are all heading towards the same angle. We have the same bearing. And therefore, we are in good hands. Now, if we think that the Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali are also in alliance, then being in alliance with Burkina Faso means that we are in alliance with the other two countries. And therefore, the link is there. The link is there. But is that the interest of the superpowers? Superpowers have permanent interest. They don't have permanent friends.
True.
Now the thing has changed from acquiring only raw materials for their industries. Help us to build our industries. It's not coming. They say, bring your raw materials. We'll produce and sell to you at higher prices. Now what they know that they've captured that market because we don't have the industries. Now the natural resources is what they are aiming at. West Africa sub-region is abound with a lot of minerals. And therefore, what their interest is now is to come and get all this. We've taken all other means to acquire our minerals, to get our minerals away by investing and giving us a very low rate because we don't have the machinery to exploit them. That is what they are doing now. And therefore, if you go against what they want from you, then they make sure that if your people are coming against you, your own nationals are saying that bad governance, corruption, these things are going on, that they want to get against you, they will use your own sub-regional country to attack you, to make sure that you don't achieve your aim. This is what is pertaining now. And this is what others, security experts are thinking about. But we think that ECOWAS countries should solve the problem of the bad governance and other issues that are going on, which will permit military takeovers, military topping the country's government. And then we call it as undemocratic. Make sure we solve all this problem. But if it is a club, as my brother said, ECOWAS countries have formed the presidents have formed a club, and therefore whatever each person is doing, they won't talk about it. Whether good or bad, they won't talk about it. But they are not the sovereign people. All the people in the various countries they have the power, and they have the power to topple their government if they are not doing the right thing. So if it's a club and they are satisfying their club members, they are going the wrong way. They should make sure that they advise their club members to make sure that the right thing is done in every country, every ECOWAS country. Advise them. If you are going wayward, look at what is happening in Ivory Coast. You check you want to stay in power for years that you think. Then ECOWAS will come in and advise the previous administration that lost the election. Now you have come to the throne and you have changed the constitution 2 times to benefit you. And ECOWAS hasn't seen anything wrong with it. Togo, the same thing. So ECOWAS countries should make sure that they advise their club members, the presidents, because the presidents are administering people in their own country who are not happy with the way they are going about things. You solve those problems. ECOWAS countries should make sure that they solve the problem of insecurity in the sub-region. Boko Haram, they have to stop them. They have to make sure, put all resources together, and then make sure that they stop them from their eastern corridor, so that they will not bleed more Boko Harams in the various countries to come and attack. Otherwise, countries, armies, or military will make sure that terrorists should not come and take over their nation. And that will be another way of toppling the African or West African governments, my brother.
Thank you very much. I have one more question for Doc. But before Doc, I want you to please chip this in real quick for me. You are in a very peculiar position. You have been in the military. You have also been a politician. So you know both types of governance. Tell me, why do military people feel like every time something is not going well, they have the responsibility to step in and correct it? Did they teach you that at military school or something? Every time something is not going right, I mean, the military feels like they have a sacred duty to come in and restore order. Why is that? I'm not saying it's bad. I just want to know.
Yes. You see, military has no business in taking over any government once the country is a democratic, practice democratic dispensation. Every country has put in its constitution that no military takeover. Democracy must prevail. The only time you see military taking over is when the country has failed, has become a failed state. There's a total anarchy. People are dying, bloodshed. Politicians are killing themselves. Then the military has the duty to come and stop the carnage. That is the only time military can come in. But these days, I always have been saying that soldiers don't make coups. They don't make military coups. But politicians, civilian politicians, induce military to take over because of the way they behave. Physically and personally, they approach military top hierarchy to stage coups and then hand over. But when the military comes on top, they see that, yeah, it's not easy to hand over that way. So you ask them, when are you going to hand over? They will ask you to hand over to whom? They won't hand over. They will stay and stay and stay until when they are satisfied. So military doesn't plan, actually. Gone were the days when it was a faction. Nigeria will stage a coup. Then the following year, Ghana will also stage. Then they were interchanging like that. These days, the democracy has come to stay. But it's because of the prevailing situation, the reasons that they are getting, like as I have said, that insecurity is what they are using now. Change of the constitution to stay longer is also another charge. Then the political persecution. Political persecution, they are prosecuting their opponents. That is another source of or good reason why soldiers will see that, yeah, the country, there's no peaceful in the country. There's no peace in the country. So all these things are come to the fore. And then soldiers will take advantage of that. But what is happening is political mistakes that the politicians do. Then insecurity. All this thing will come together. The military will come in. But they will be induced. They will be induced and influenced by the politicians, my brother.
Okay. All right. I'll come to you for your last words, Major. But let me give Doc the opportunity for his last question. Doc, so now with what Major has just said, you know, and all that, let's look at democracy really is. Because people, I mean, Nigeria went in to restore democracy in their eyes, in the eyes of the Beninese people or the Beninois people, who are the actual, who should be the actual people determining how they should be governed, in their eyes, they did not have democracy, which is why there was a military coup. So both sides are claiming lack of democracy, if you will. What's your take there before we go?
Sure. I think we need to cast our minds back to Nigeria itself. And
Doc, sorry to butt in here, but please add to that this for me. Is it very necessary for us to align with this structured so-called democracy that has been imposed on us? Which every 4 years or every how many ever years go, is it necessary to align with that to govern ourselves? Please throw that in for me. And sorry for
all right. So you know, we got to cast our minds back to Nigeria itself. I think that the last Nigerian elections that were held were by and large seen as questionable in terms of the outcome, right? And I think that is something that is happening in a lot of West African countries where people have lost faith in the so-called democratic process, because the whole idea was that if this is our power, that's the people's power, and they vote for this person, then that person should be the one who should be in the lead. Now we also know that more often than not, apart from the constitutional changes that are made by places in countries such as Togo and Ivory Coast and others, the elections, by and large, as we just saw in Cameroon, are rigged. So people are actually tired of the so-called democratic process because they know that, you know, they may feel one way and then the outcome is also going to be one way. And therefore, it begs the question, how can Nigeria, which is questionable in terms of its democratic credential, seek to restore democracy in another country, right? So that is that. But to your other point, should we import the democratic systems of the West and practice in our countries? I say absolutely not. Now, why? Because the democratic systems of the West are born out of the culture and understanding of the people of the West.
The needs also.
Say it again.
The needs also.
Absolutely, and the needs as well. And we as Africans also have our own culture and also our understandings, right? And our democracy should be fashioned with those cultures and understandings and needs, as you put it, in mind. So far, it seems like we just brought the Westminster model or the American model and just brought it to our countries. Now, even in terms of being able to be impactful, 4 years for African countries really is not enough time for any government to really make any lasting impact. That is something that if we were to go by the way our understandings are, we would see that for our needs, we need to have a more extended period of time and other things, not just the needs, but even the structure of the whole thing. How do we structure our systems to be able to reflect the understandings, the needs, the culture of the people? So yes, it's good to have a society that is looking at people power by voting and stuff like that. But at the same time, that system should not be one that is able to be rigged by the powers that be. And also it shouldn't be one that is simply one that has been taken and just brought into our environment without consideration given to our peculiar ways of doing things and our peculiar needs and our peculiar understandings.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwadwo Oppong-Wadie. Now, before we go, Major, I'll give you a quick minute to give us your final words.
Yeah. You talk about the democracy in Africa. If we want to draw ourselves down to West Africa, a democracy in Africa is the same as democracy in West Africa, and the same as democracy globally. Now, democracy has different kinds of freedoms. Freedom of worship, freedom of association, freedom of all freedoms. And we have rule of law. So all the tenets of democracy are all there. But you see, it looks like when other governments come to power, they think that democracy is theirs and not for other people. So they overdo things. And if you challenge, if you go against what they think is the democracy, then you are taught a big lesson. You are arrested, try to find a fault with you and try you, at times jail you. Whether you have committed anything or not, they try and force against. So the democracy in Africa doesn't triumph well. It looks like we are running ahead of the democracy, where somebody's freedom ends, another starts from that place. So if you think that freedom is for you alone and not for any other person, you are wrong. So if we want democracy to triumph very, very well in Africa or in West Africa, we should follow the tenets. We should all make sure that what is good for the goose is good for the gander. Otherwise, democracy will be seen as just rhetoric and not practical.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Major. And last words, Doc, before we go, please. Dr. Oppong-Wadie, your last words, please, before we go. Oh, I don't know if we have lost Dr. Kwadwo Oppong-Wadie. Let's bring him back for his last words. Guys, let's see if we can add. Doc, are you still there? Okay, we seem to have lost him. So thank you all the same. Dr. Kwadwo Oppong-Wadie, writer, Pan-Africanist, educationist here in the United States. And thank you very much, Major Retired Derrick Oduro. Now, Major, oye kwabna na oye kweku. Me sure so be mu ba.
Ose.
Oye kwabna na so oye kweku.
Yaw.
Oh, meeting. Next time. Every time yeah, Befro bia Mrs. Ya, what you work, I mean, him say, oh, nice sequence, so I will baby. Me sure for
yes.
Oh, nice sequence. So still, you made it for us. We really appreciate that, sir. Thank you very much for joining us on today's show.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you later, sir. Thank you very much. Okay. So, wow, what a riveting discussion with former Deputy Defense Minister, Major Retired Derrick Oduro, and writer, Pan-Africanist, educationist, Dr. Kwadwo Oppong-Wadie on security in the sub-region. That's the West African sub-region. We're going to go for a short commercial break. Say, Babaka, we have another interview for you. As I said, we're going back to our guest from last week to learn more about the alleged brutalities by national security operatives on the people of Fiaso. Please stay. We will be right back after this short commercial break.